Okay, I'm gonna get us started. So thank you all so much for joining us for today's training on rental arrears. My name is Tess Summer, and I'm the project coordinator for the Bronx Health and Housing Consortium. If you're new here, the consortium is a collaborative network of healthcare, housing, homeless, and social service organizations, as well as government partners, with the shared goal of improving health equity and housing stability. We work together by fostering cross-sector relationships, informing policy, building the capacity of frontline workers, and bridging the gaps between the health and housing sectors. As part of this, we often host trainings for frontline staff across various sectors about the state of housing, health services, and legal options for clients. A few housekeeping items. Everyone is already set on mute when you join the call, so please do not unmute unless you are maybe asking a question. We have live transcriptions available. To enable or disable them, click the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any questions throughout the training, please enter them in the chat box at any time. We are going to have a few moments to pause and take questions, but if we don't get to your questions during that time, we will get to them at the nice long Q&A we have built into the end of the training today. Additionally, if any resources come up for you that have been helpful to you and your clients, definitely feel free to share those in the chat. Use the resources that you have to help your colleagues in the space. You should have received the slides by email earlier this morning, depending on when you registered. And I will also send them again after this training, along with the recording of this session. And so with that, we are extremely grateful to Isotube Berry, who is the staff attorney for the Legal Aid Society, for leading today's training. We partner with Legal Aid frequently to provide these trainings, and we really always appreciate their expertise and their knowledge in this space. So I will hand it off to you, Isotube.
Thank you so much, Tess, and thank you everyone for being here on time. I see a lot of the organizations that me and my colleagues work with showing up in the chat. And so I'm so grateful. I just want to say before I start, I'm so grateful that you all are here. And thank you for your work with helping with housing in New York City and making sure that people have stability. So there are going to be points in time where pause for.
Hi everyone, please mute yourself. Thank you.
So thanks, Tess. There will be points in time where I pause for questions, and then we'll also have a lot of time at the end for some Q&A. So if you want to wait until the end to put in your questions, or if you want to put them in the chat, I'll try and pay attention. All right, so we're going to be talking about rental arrears today. First, we're going to be talking about the need for arrears. Sometimes someone doesn't necessarily have to have a housing court case in order to need rental assistance, right? And then we're going to talk about assessing the needs. What does it look like when someone needs rental assistance, and how can we make sure that we're getting them the exact help that they need? We're also going to be talking about the type of arrears, right? So there are one-time arrears, and there's ongoing assistance that can help pay for some of the arrears. So as you all know, a lot of things has changed because of the pandemic, but one thing that still remains is housing insecurity. So what does housing insecurity look like, right? Housing insecurity doesn't always necessarily mean that an individual is street homeless or living in a shelter. Housing insecurity, as someone who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, I've definitely experienced housing insecurity. It can mean just the unaffordability of rent. It can mean not having enough space for your family. It can mean living with extended family. It can mean sharing a room with someone. It can mean living with strangers, or it can mean living in a homeless shelter. So I really want to highlight that sometimes we ourselves or our clients are housing insecure, and because rent is expensive. And so it's important to recognize that just because someone has a place to live in doesn't mean that they are housing secure, and there might be additional issues going around with the affordability of the rent. So today we're going to talk about some resources of how we can make a household housing secure. But I also want to highlight that there are no self-help evictions, right? And what that means is that if an individual had a lease, or lived in a space for at least 30 days, the landlord must get permission from a housing court judge to evict that individual. Sometimes our clients come to us with a letter from their landlord and they say that they received an eviction notice because that letter says you must leave by the end of the week. That is not the proper way to evict someone if they have had a lease or if they've been in a space for 30 days. And we'll talk about at the end what you need to do if someone does receive an eviction notice or if obtaining the arrears doesn't work out. But in New York State, you have the right to be evicted, right? So a judge must agree to the eviction if an individual has a lease or has lived in an apartment for 30 days, right? A landlord can't just change the locks or turn off the heat. There must be an additional step of getting permission from a judge, right? So now we're going to go on to the need for arrears, right? So we're going to talk about two types of assistance that individuals can get for rental assistance, right? So the need for arrears comes a lot right now from COVID-19 related issues, loss of job, increase of expenses, right? Loss of job or income can be something so definitely separate from COVID-19. Someone might have moved out. Someone might have moved into the household to increase the expenses, right? Sometimes our clients are able to pay the rent every once in a while, but they've fallen too far behind, right? And so they just really need that additional assistance to get them back on track to being able to pay the rent. Sometimes there's a change in the household. A child joins the family or someone passes away, and that changes the income or changes the amount of mouths that need to be fed, right? And sometimes there are just unforeseen circumstances, right? Something might happen, an expense might come up where the household just really needs assistance, rental assistance, right? And so the way that all of these needs for arrears are different, but every single one of them can be solved with rental assistance, right? And so to assess how we can get that rental assistance, there are some questions that we need to ask. What type of housing do you have? Some clients know, oh, I live in a rent stabilized house. I live in a rent controlled apartment. Or I don't know what type of housing I have, but I live in a private house. That's unregulated, right? And so that's an important question because as you'll see later, it can impact the type of rental assistance that's available to tenants. The ages of household members, right? If there's a senior citizen in a household, if there's a child, a baby in the household, that can provide more access to more resources. The physical and mental ability of household members. There are certain types of assistance that's available to individuals who need additional assistance physically and mentally as well. The household income. So most of the individuals that we work with are low income individuals, but it's frustrating to see sometimes someone can just be right over the bar of being under 200% of the federal poverty level, and that will limit what they're able to access. But if they're extremely under that bar, then they might be able to access more ongoing assistance. Shelter history. Have they lived in a Department of Homeless Services shelter before, right? So that can open up a huge window of access as I work with some of your organizations to help figure that out in order to get access to certain type of rental assistance for clients. Veteran status, right? Some clients have access to veteran status. Housing, veterans have specific things that they have access to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the individual that you are helping. It can be someone who just lives in the household, right? And so these are some of the questions you might want to ask in order to figure out, okay, where can we look first? Or what's the strongest form of rental assistance we can get this family? So in addition to asking these questions, there are also some documents that you will need. And the important thing to remember about these documents is that You'll need them usually no matter which avenue you choose for applying for rental assistance, right? So identity, so normally when this happens, I usually like to tell my clients at my first or second meeting with them that I need these documents, because even if we're still figuring out a plan for what are we gonna apply for, I know that whatever we apply for, they're gonna want some, if not all of these documents, right? So identity, that includes birth certificates for individuals who are under the age of 18, social security number, and state ID for adults. Residents, right? They want to see the lease with the rent amount. If there is no lease, they might want a letter from the landlord or the future landlord. If there is a deed, they might want that as well so that the name of the landlord matches. They might also want the court papers, right? Some of these rental assistance is only available through going through court. So they want proof that the household does in fact have a housing court case. Family composition, that means they want to know who lives in the apartment or who is a part of the household. That includes birth certificates, school records, and immunization records for children, right? The rent paid or the cost of the rent, that can be the rent, that can be a breakdown from the landlord, or even the court papers might be able to list what rent the landlord is seeking. If the client does not have the rent papers, the current rent paperwork, you can also use the previous lease, right? All income, right? So that includes unemployment, which for a long time was a big source of income for a lot of my clients. And a lot of the clients would verify over the phone instead of on the computer or through their email, right? So sometimes we have to be a little bit more creative with how we get these documents. That's why it's important to ask in the beginning. Same with SSD and SSI. Sometimes documents are misplaced, right? So you'll have to request that paperwork beforehand. So what I usually do in our first meeting with a client, I'll say, okay, you receive SSI. Do you have your SSI award letter, which lists how much you're getting? If they don't have their award letter, we'll figure out a way to contact the Social Security Administration. But I know getting that award letter is going to take some time. So the sooner we do it in the process, the more likely it won't stall the process of getting the rental assistance, right? Work income, most places want 4 pay stubs to prove that the work is regular, to confirm the amount. If they're receiving public assistance or SNAP benefits, you want to get their HRA case number so that you can get access to get a budget letter, right? Savings and resources. Unfortunately, savings and resources are a huge part of taking into consideration, but we must explain to our clients that just because the sources that want to assist with rental assistance want the savings and resources, that doesn't mean that that household will be denied, right? For example, I had a client who had medical bills and their savings was used for their medical bills, right? And they didn't want to touch that money for the rent. So it's important to explain to our clients that any type of resources that they might have, they won't necessarily be forced to use it, but it is an important part of lowering what's owed. Tax returns, if someone is applying for rental assistance, pretty much from January through June, wherever they're applying, they're going to want to know, did the household receive tax returns, and how much was the tax returns? And if the tax returns are no longer available, what was the tax return used for? So this is where it's important that, we build that relationship with our clients so that they feel comfortable telling us this, and also that we help them understand that we're on their team, right? We're trying to figure out what is the best way of getting all of these, getting all of the rent that's owed paid. Lawful residents in the US. So while there are some programs Not a lot, but there are very few programs that will allow a household that's completely out of status, or also known as undocumented, to receive rental assistance. Most programs need at least one individual in the household to have a lawful residence in the United States. And passport, resident card, deferred status would be some ways that you would be able to prove that. So like it says in the note below, this list doesn't include everything, but it's a good start. And it will also start the wheels rolling of, okay, you have this, okay, these are the documents that we're gonna need. It puts you one step ahead, and it also allows the client to feel like they are part of the team when you're able to say, okay, I will do this part, but I need you to do that part. Sometimes it's difficult for our clients to get these documents. So this is where we can rely on the different agencies that they get the documents from to get those documents as well, because it is really important. And some organizations that we request rental arrears from will understand that we're unable to get all of the documents, but they do want to see that you are putting in a good faith effort to get the documents. So now we're going to go on to the type of arrears. So I'm going to talk about two specific type of arrears today. One is one-time assistance. The second one is ongoing assistance. So for one-time assistance, there's rental arrears from HRA. There are charities that provide assistance. And this no longer exists, but I do want to talk about it. There's Erap. So Erap no longer exists, but I will spend a little bit of time just talking about what Erap looks like and the possibility of it coming back in the future. So ongoing assistance, there are a lot of more sources for that. So there's HASA, there's shelter allowance provided through HRA, there's the FEPS program, there's the city FEPS program, there's SCREE and DREE, there's foster rental assistance, there's NYCHA public housing, and there's also different types of Section 8 public housing. So as you can see, ongoing assistance has a whole lot more available, but it's a little bit more difficult to get ongoing rental assistance. And we'll talk about why later. But these are most of the type of arrears that our clients have access to. Sometimes there are other types of arrears, but for the most part, these are what we are able to help them get. So we're going to start talking with one-time assistance. So the great thing about one-time assistance is that just because you are getting one-time assistance doesn't mean you only have to go to one source. In fact, it's much appreciated when you're able to, especially if the amount is a large amount, able to go to different sources to get the amount, right? So I have some clients who were approved for Erap, but that didn't cover their entire amount of arrears. So we did still have to go to charities in order to get the little amount that would end their case, because going ahead in the future, they are still able to get their rent paid by themselves. They just needed help with the back pay, right? So here are some tips for getting rent arrears from any source, right? A lot of the organizations for one-time assistance will want clients to show future ability to pay the rent. If our clients are on a fixed income, that might be an award letter for their Social Security benefit, or that might be workers' compensation award letter. I always tell my clients to make sure they have the current month's rent and take a picture of that money order for me. And we talk through what the plan is for paying the future rent. If a family member is helping, I'll have that family member write a letter, sign a letter, and have their phone number on that letter. Sometimes I'll have a client who has a family member who'll say, hello, my name is such and such. I'm gonna help with this individual's rent by paying $200 a month. That individual must also show their income as well, to show that they can afford their income their rent and paying whatever additional amount that they're gonna pay. A reasonable explanation for how they fell behind, and saying that it will not recur, right? So a reasonable explanation is essentially your client explaining why they were unable to pay the rent, right? And those are some of the reasons that we spoke about before, about where does the need for this rental assistance come from, and what will the client attempt to do to show that it will not occur again. So sometimes this can be a little bit of a difficult conversation to have with clients, but it is important, right? We are trying to help our clients figure out a plan. And that's not always easy with the limited income that some clients have, but that's where we try and figure out if they can access the ongoing rental assistance, because we know that it's not feasible for them to remain in this expensive apartment. What's the plan for getting a zero balance, right? So if the arrears are $7,000 and you are only requesting $5,000 from this one source, what's the plan for the extra $2,000, right? Is that gonna come from the tax returns? Is that gonna come from family and friends or the community? Sometimes we have clients whose communities help them out with their rent arrears. So we'll only have to request a smaller amount. Any sympathetic factors, right? It's hard because clients usually have to share a lot of themselves in order to get rental assistance, and that's not always fair. But if there is any issue that gone on in a household that might help in explaining why the household fell into arrears, it could be helpful. But make sure you get your client's permission before you tell their business to whoever you're applying to for rental assistance, right? It really helps our clients when we're able to organize the packet, whatever packet we're making, with a cover letter, right? And that cover letter can basically give this the information that's here, right? This is where the future ability is going to come from. Here's a picture of the current month's rent. Here's the explanation for why we fell behind and why it's not going to happen again. Here's the plan for getting a zero balance, right? And here are the sympathetic factors. What's most important is regularly following up with the sources of the rental assistance, right? A lot of the organizations that provide rental assistance have a lot of clients. And so it's important that you keep in touch, or that you ask for a timeline, because with asking for that timeline, you'll have a better idea, and you'll be able to tell your client, who might be anxious and waiting for a response about whether or not they're going to get that rental assistance. Regular follow-up also helps the individuals who are doing the application keep your client at the top of their mind. So I'm going to take a little pause now to go so that I can answer some of the questions in the chat. We will be talking about assistance for clients who opt to move. We will be talking more about Erap. But any person who has applied for Erap already, they have not missed the deadline for applying. They can continue to add documents if they have an email account associated with their application. Any other questions at this time? And we will be having the recording will be available to individuals later. Angel Santiago, what is a SOTA grant? I'm not sure. If you could explain it in the chat, or if you want, you can unmute yourself and explain what that is. I can try and figure out. Is there a cap on how much these programs are willing to cover? I would say yes. That's why I suggest that you get you get the amount from different sources. A lot of we will be talking about one-time assistance. I'm guessing that's like a one-shot deal or a rent arrears grant. That's going to be the next part we talk about. I don't know what a Sota grant is, but what I will do is I'll look that up and get back to you at a later time. We will talk about what clients who have applied for Erap should do. So for any specific questions, I will answer at the end for individual, for like specific family, specific instances. Angel Santiago, I don't know a special one-time assistance, I'm guessing is a one-shot deal, but I will look into it and just to confirm. Give me a second. So it looks like the Sota program is specifically for people who are coming out of the homeless shelter. So those people don't have rent arrears. And this program is specific, this training is specifically for families that have rent arrears. But the SOTA program is specifically out for individuals who are coming out of the homeless shelter. So I wouldn't know much about that program, but we do have homeless rights attorneys. And if you would like for me to connect you with them, they could probably give you more information, but none of my clients are coming out of a homeless shelter. All of my clients are being sued by landlords. They closed Erap, I think last night. Not last Sunday night, sorry. But I will talk about Erap and what that looks like. There are some resources for undocumented clients, and I will try and mention them soon. So if you would like assistance to help to evict someone, I would reach out to the New York City Bar. Legal aid does not evict individuals, so I would not know what to tell you with that. So I'm gonna go on, but there'll definitely be a time for more questions at the end as well. But thank you for your questions, these are all great. So we're gonna talk about applying for one-time rental assistance, right? So there is the one-shot deal, which can be a grant or loan for an individual not receiving cash assistance. There's also the rent arrears grant, which can be a grant or loan for individuals receiving cash assistance. A lot of times, one-shot deal and rent arrears grants are used interchangeably because the only difference is either the household is receiving cash assistance or they're not, right? Because ultimately the results are the same. One thing I want to emphasize about one-shot deals or rent arrears grants is they can be a grant, which means that it doesn't have to be paid back, or it can be a loan, which means that it does have to be paid back. At this point in time, we have not seen a lot of loans for one-shot deals or rent arrears grants. Pre-COVID, I did have clients who requested rent arrears grants, and they were able to get those rent arrears grants as a loan. What my clients did is you're expected to pay off 10% each month to pay off that loan. I had clients who weren't able to afford that 10%, So they just let HRA know that they were not able to afford the 10%, and they did pay an amount. I had a client who was sending $3 every month, and that was just her plan to pay off the rent arrears grant, because they haven't really done this, but HRA can sue you for not paying off that loan. The exception to policy. So that is a loan or a grant for an individual who already has a subsidy and who will not normally be eligible for rental assistance. So it's sometimes called a one-time on. The exception to policy is for households that have FEPs, city FEPs, TBRA, Section 8, who might live in NYCHA. I've gotten an exception to policy for a client who lives in NYCHA housing. And so these are households where the majority of their rent is paid by an organization, but they are required to pay a little bit of an amount, and they're unable to afford that amount, right? And they've fallen so behind on rental assistance, on their rent amount, that they need assistance, right? And so I've helped clients get a one-time on NYCHA, which means they're only supposed to get it one time, but I've had clients with multiple one-shot deals, but I think they're being more strict now with who's eligible for a one-shot deal and how many times a household can receive a one-shot deal, but they will help pay that person's rent amount, the small rent amount, to get them back to zero. So, but they do need to prove that they have future ability to pay that rent. So these are 3 types of one-time rental assistance that households can get through HRA. And now we're going to talk about how to submit these applications. So during the pandemic, an application for rent arrears are processed in 4 ways. Hra Mobile App, right? It's called Access HRA, a paper application, a home visit or a homebound visit, and a scheduled appointment at the center. So I'm going to go through what each of these steps looks like and what the next step after the submitting the application looks like as well. So the Hra Mobile App. This is what HRA prefers, and it is the fastest step, the fastest way to apply. So our clients can go onto the Access Hra Mobile App and Document Upload app or the HRA website and deliver the documents there. So if this is for a household with income other than cash assistance, they have to fill out the application for cash assistance and check off the box rent arrears and upload all of the documents. If there is already an open cash assistance case, the household has to submit a special grant request for rent arrears on the web or mobile app and use the document upload to upload the documents. So this is the fastest way to do it, but it's not perfect, right? So everyone has, if a household does not already have cash assistance, they have to submit an application for cash assistance. Under that application for cash assistance, there is a box to check off requesting rent arrears. So even if the household does not want to apply for cash assistance and does not qualify for cash assistance, they would still submit the cash assistance application. So the app is not it's not perfect, but it is the fastest way to apply for rental assistance through HRA. There's also the paper application. The paper application will take longer than using the Access HRA, but for individuals who have no open cash assistance case or who are unable to use the app, it might be the easiest way for them, right? So the phone number is on the screen. You can call the HRA info line for a paper application. Now, when it was deep in the pandemic, it did take a little while for these paper applications to get to our clients or to get to us so that we can bring them to our clients. But I'm hoping that that process, I haven't done it in a while, but I'm hoping that process has sped up a little bit. You can also download an application, and the link is on the screen, and it's also in the packet that you all received. So it's just like the app. You're filling out a cash assistance application, and you just have to check off that rent arrears are needed. Then you can call back the HRA info line to figure out where you can drop off the documents and the supporting documents as well. You can try, they might also be able to give you a fax number for you to fax those, because right now we're not suggesting that anyone goes to a job center. So this is only for households where there is already no cash assistance. HRA is figuring out a process for households that have an open cash assistance case and cannot apply online. So when I say cash assistance, I mean households that are receiving money besides SNAP on their HRA benefits card, right? That's a household that's receiving cash assistance. And some households are already receiving shelter assistance, so that would be included in that. So the third way is to apply is through a home visit. If your client has a disability or needs a reasonable accommodation for any HRA application, they can request a home visit. What that is, a reasonable accommodation can include a lot of things. So be over inclusive when you think a client might need a home visit. You can call the HRA Office of Constituent Services, and the phone number and the email address are on the screen and in the paperwork. You can also fax them. I find that they're pretty responsive via email, so I would definitely send them an email. So HRA can schedule a home visit or a phone appointment, depending on what the client needs. Make sure to ask how long the wait will be before the client is called or visited by HRA to start the process, and have the client prepare any identity, any documents that will need to be copied, labeled, and sent to the center. Because if someone is coming from the home visit, you can just hand over the documents. What I have done is, for my clients who need additional assistance pre-COVID, I did go to the apartment on the day of the home visit and just have everything ready so that I can answer questions, and also I can get any paperwork that they are giving my client to confirm that the home visit happened. They don't give you a specific time, unfortunately. It's usually a time frame. So like the morning of November 16th or the afternoon of November 17th. I have had situations where I've gone to my clients' apartments for their home visits and no one ever showed up. And they told me that they showed up, but I was there and no one showed up. And then you would just call back HRA's Office of Constituent Services, tell them that no one showed up at the appointment, and ask for the appointment to be rescheduled. And also I give them my phone number as a number that they can call if they attempt to enter the building or the home and they're unable to do so. So this is a last resort. Right now, we don't encourage this method because the pandemic is still a thing, right? So as a last resort, households can schedule an appointment at an open center. You would call the HRA info line to make an appointment. And then once you make an appointment, go with the documents, and you won't even necessarily be talking to an individual. If you've ever been to an HRA job center, you know that they have these self-service stations, kiosks, where you can press buttons as to why you're there, etc. And you would fill out the application and someone would take the documents that you have. So you may not necessarily, sometimes clients want this option so that they can talk to someone in person, but it doesn't always go out that way because, especially during the pandemic, they've limited the amount of face-to-face interactions they're having with individuals. But sometimes there are individuals who are helpful, who will step out and talk to clients. The client should receive a call back to review the application once they are at home. So those are the 4 ways for applying. I see that I have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to just pause a little bit. What do clients who apply for Erap and receive the acknowledgement? I will talk about Erap. Yes, I would suggest if you are requesting one-time assistance, definitely you can get help from all of these organizations at the same time. I would suggest doing that because that's the best way to make sure that your client receives all of the money that they need.
I have a couple of the questions
Yeah.
pulled out because I know that's the chat has a lot of questions going on, which is awesome. Someone's wondering, what are the rights with someone who is being evicted because the landlord wants to rent to a family member and the individual has also accumulated rental arrears?
So it depends on the size of the apartment. I know that sounds like a specific situation that I might talk more about at the end, but in that case, if it is a private house, unfortunately at this time, landlords in private houses are allowed to do that. It's called a no grounds holdover. If the landlord has taken steps to begin a lawsuit, I would suggest that that individual reach out to a lawyer because those are the hardest types of cases that I usually have. And it's not that we can't do anything for that person, but the best solution is probably to help that household move out and figure out where they can move out, where they can also get rental assistance. Because unfortunately, at this time, small landlords are allowed to evict an individual from the household if they want, without any reason at all. We're trying to change that through legislation, but that's how it is right now.
Thank you for that. What determines whether a client receives a grant versus a loan?
Great question. So right now we're not seeing a lot of loans, but usually we will see a loan if it's a second shot deal or third, like if it's more than one time. Also, we might see a loan where the household is considered a household with stable income, right? So if they're over 200% of the federal poverty, under 200% of the federal poverty level, if they are making enough money. Also, if they're not receiving any type of special assistance, like if they are not on cash assistance, we might see that. But I've also seen clients on cash assistance get that because it was their second time, third time applying for a one-shot deal. Usually when that happens, we call it a recoupment. When someone is being recouped, we request a fair hearing from HRA immediately and challenge that recoupment just off the bat, even if we don't necessarily have a basis for challenging it, because most of the recoupment notices don't give the adequate information. So if you know anyone who receives a loan and they are being recouped, is what we say, I would challenge it and request a fair hearing.
Thank you. A lot of the questions so far have been about Erap, and rest assured everyone, we will get to it.
Yep. I knew that it would be a big deal, even though the application closed on the 14th.
Yeah.
But yep, we will get to it, I promise.
You may have already answered this, so apologies if I missed that. Someone asked how many one-shot deals a person can have in a year.
There's no great way for me to answer that question. In a year, so HRA doesn't like to give more than one shot deal in 365 days, right? But I have helped clients maybe in a 2-3 year time span get about 5-6 one-shot deals. But these were individuals who had extenuating circumstances, health issues, age issues, household size issues, right? So it's definitely normally for situations where the household is going through a lot and they just really, really need some assistance to get back to zero.
Question in the chat, are there any rent arrears for undocumented families?
Yep, so we'll talk about one source. only one source that I know of. But what I'll say about, when you say undocumented families, when the entire family is undocumented, I only know of one source, and that's Fastin. But if there is at least one person who has some type of status in the United States, and that one person can be a child, we usually still try and advocate for that entire household to receive some type of rental assistance.
And we'll hear more about that later, it sounds like. And then, can someone upload documents via the Hra app?
No. So in the slides, I also mentioned, I'm just going to go back. How do I go back? Okay, I'm just going to go back so that I can say the name specifically, but there is a document upload app. So unfortunately, there are two apps. There's the Access Hra Mobile App and the Document Upload app, or they can use the Hra website to upload documents. So there is a second app for uploading documents.
Do you want to take a few more? Or do you want to move on?
Sure, I'll take a few more. It seems like they're all related.
I have one here. Have you heard Hra paying a one-shot deal twice? And would the client be eligible to receive the remaining balance?
Not the same one-shot deal twice, but I have had clients receive 2 one-shot deals within the same year, and that's usually like really extenuating circumstances. Like my client has cancer and lost her job and now has to have throat surgery to get her trachea, right? Like really extenuating circumstances. They don't just do it because COVID, right? Like that's not a thing anymore. But yeah. Yep, and I'll talk about the resource for undocumented individuals. I'll definitely mention it later.
I think most of the other questions I have are
okay.
Yeah.
So after applying, after a client applies for assistance from Hra, a worker should be calling the client back to review their application. If the client does not get a call back within 2 business days, call the rescheduling unit. Advocates can also send an email to RAU advocate cases at hra.nyc.gov, right? And so you can also request a fair hearing and do an advocate's inquiry. It's really easy to do those things. You can just Google that, and there's a sheet that you can fill out online. There's an online form, super easy to request a fair hearing. I would say any issue that your client has with Hra, whether it's food stamps, whether it's Medicare, whether it's rental assistance, and if they are having an issue, request a fair hearing automatically, because that puts Hra on notice that there is an issue, and they would have to take the steps. You're letting them know that something is wrong here and they have to take action. So I always request a fair hearing for my clients, or I do an advocate's inquiry. I've even requested it for family members before, so that the issue can just be resolved. I think that's the quickest way to get an answer from Hra. Does it always work? No, but I really do think that I've had the most success with doing an advocate's inquiry and then requesting a fair hearing. There are 2 different steps. A fair hearing is requesting going in front of an administrative judge, right? So kind of like a case, but for the benefits. And an advocate's inquiry is basically what it's in its name. It's when an advocate is requesting more information about an issue on behalf of their client. Usually when I have a client who has an issue and I do the advocate's inquiry, I don't even get a response. They just resolve the issue because I'm seeing something that's not right, and then they fix it. So I find an advocate's inquiry to be very, very helpful with resolving some of these issues. And the slides will be made available. So preparing for the call. Our clients will get a call from HRA after the application is submitted. Unfortunately, sometimes they call from blocked numbers. Other times, and I have some of the phone numbers on the screen, and you also get a copy of this presentation, right? So some of the numbers that we've been able to catch that they call from are here. Some people don't answer anonymous phone calls. Some people don't answer phone calls from numbers that they don't recognize, right? But let your clients know that they will be receiving a phone call. HRE is supposed to call them 2 times, right? Many clients say that they didn't get a call. HRE is supposed to leave a message on the second call letting them know to call the HRA info line. If they did not receive any call, or if they missed the first call and never received the second call the rescheduling unit to request a callback, and request that the rescheduling unit give you a time and day for that callback. They usually call in the evening, around from like 6 on, unfortunately, and it's not in business hours. So sometimes our clients are expecting a phone call during business hours. It's not during business hours. So also ask for a confirmation number when you call the rescheduling unit to reschedule the phone call. If none of these are working, if you call the rescheduling unit and they never call back, or you're just unable to get someone, call 311 and ask for assistance. I would say that is the next step to try and figure out what's the best way to get your client. This would be the interview portion of the application, right? So that would be the next step. So now we have time for a little bit of a break. So yes, advocate's inquiry is for any HRA matter. It really is a great tool. And yep. So we will take a little bit of a break. Let's see. It's 3:54 right now. How about everyone return at 4 o'clock? Does that sound good, Tess?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We'll see everyone at 4. So this is a long training and everyone needs a moment here. So
definitely.
We'll in a few minutes.
Alrighty.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back. We'll get started again.
Alrighty. So now we're going to move on to talking about charities. So there is such a long list of charities that I could never, ever give you the entire list. Just know that a lot of organizations, even if they themselves don't have rental assistance, they are associated with other organizations that do. So using charities is important when tenants have been denied an HRA grant or loan, or when HRA is like, they come back to you and they say, okay, we're gonna pay this, we're not paying the entire amount. So you just need to reach out to some charities, right? So I usually have people start with the Emergency Rent Coalition hotline, and their number is on the next page. And I have just a small list of some of the bigger charities that provide assistance. But like I said, there are so many organizations that provide rental assistance or housing assistance because it is foundational to so many people. When you do reach out to the charities, build and maintain those contacts. Those are individuals who you can reach back out to if you have an emergency situation or if you just want more information on something, right? So each charity has its own form and its own process. Some charities, you have to be a part of a certain community in order to benefit from the assistance, and some you do not. They just need a whole lot of information from you, right? So the charities are a great source of rental assistance for a lot of individuals, particularly one-time rental assistance. And they've been doing a lot of amazing work right now during the pandemic to make sure that people are not evicted or that people are on top of their rent, are not housing insecure. So here are a list of just some charities, right? There is the Emergency Rent Coalition hotline. They're a great resource because they give access to a lot of different charities. So I would say that's a great starting point. I know that some of you work at some of the organizations listed here, so thank you in advance for your work. But we also have Homebase, and there will be a handout passed out afterwards that has a list of the home bases. Depending on what zip code your client lives in, they have to go to a specific home base in order to receive assistance. Catholic Charities, Federation of Protestant Welfare Organizations, the Bridge Fund, which is a loan, not a grant, Coalition for the Homeless, Part of the Solution, also known as POTS. So these are just some of the charities that are available. And yes, most of these charities are only accessible to residents of New York State. So now we are going to go on to Erap, right? So at this point in time, there are no new applications can be submitted for Erap as of November 14th. So that was Sunday night, right? But it may be refilled. So definitely pay attention to what's going on at the OTDA website. You could just even Google Erap to just check in if it's refilled. News sources have also been kind of good with announcing when Erap is refilled. So the idea right now is hopefully some states who have not used all of their money that's tagged for rental assistance will have to return their money to the federal government in order for it to be reshuffled to states that have spent all of that money. So we are hoping that Erap will be refilled, or there might be an increase of resources. We are also just advocating for people to be able to still submit applications at this time. So there are legal aid attorneys who are speaking to politicians and trying to advocate and lobby for the application to be reopened. There are a lot of great housing organizations that are doing the same as well. So for those of you who are familiar with the Erap application, Landlord Cooperation is highly suggested to apply. It's not mandatory, but it will hold up the application. the application won't necessarily get denied because of a landlord's refusal to cooperate, but the application will take a longer time to process. And there is no future ability to pay rent in order to qualify to get an Erap approval. So unlike most of the other sources of one-time rental assistance where the households need to show that they have future ability to pay the rent, you do not need that with Erap. I will take a moment to answer some Erap questions now. I'll start with the last one, Tess, and give you a moment to just, so the last one that I see is, what are the reasons an Erap form may be deleted or rejected? The only time that I've ever seen that happen is for duplicates. So, for those of you who know, Erap hasn't been the easiest system to work with. Calling doesn't always help you get the answer that you want. Or that you need. So usually me and my colleagues, we'll call the Erap hotline and see if they're able to answer the question. Sometimes they are unable to answer the question. That does not mean that there is no answer to the question, right? So sometimes you have to call and speak to another individual. So a person can find out if they were approved by going to the Erap website, which is on the screen right now. It's not the last thing on the screen, but also you can just Google Erap and it should pop up. There's a spot where you can check the status of an application and you would put in the application number. So they would need their application number, and you can also put in the date of birth of the applicant. The person in the household whose name the application is under. If they don't have that information, or if it's just not working out, they can call the Erap hotline, which is also, their phone number is on the Erap website. So that would be the easiest way for them to apply, to figure out the status of their application.
Great. I have a number of questions, people wondering, after applying for Erap, how long until you find out if you've been approved?
If the application was submitted during the first month that the application was open, I think that was June 2021, they should know by now. Everything else, the timeline has been really, really weird. Unfortunately, right now there's so little information for us. I would say call the Erap hotline and see if they can provide you with additional information. Sometimes I've had to call the Erap hotline more than once to get the answer that I needed. I'm not saying that. So sometimes the workers aren't provided with the information that they need in order to help me out. So sometimes I myself need to call the Erap hotline again in order to get the information that I need. And so if you have someone who has submitted an application and it's just stalled at this point in time, definitely call, because that would be the fastest way to get any information on the status.
And we will make sure to include the hotline in our follow-up email. And we'll also try and drop it in the chat during this training. And so if you are approved, how long until the money is sent to the landlord?
I'm so sorry. A lot of my answers are going to be, I don't know. There have been a wide variety for a lot of our clients. Some will get it within a month of the approval and some will not. Some landlords have also been unresponsive, but we're pretty sure that they got the money, but they haven't confirmed with us that they've received the money yet. I think it's also a fact that this is the first time something like Erap has ever existed. So they're still working it out as they go along. I Sometimes it is posted on, it should be posted on the Erap website after you are able to check the status of a case with the name and the date of birth. I'm sorry, with the application number and the date of birth. You might see that the check has been sent, but even sometimes that information might be too quick to be put there. It might be the check is planning to be sent. So I would say a combination of checking the website and also calling the hotline, and also seeing if you have a cooperative landlord, reaching out to that landlord and trying to just confirm with them that their information has been submitted, because if they didn't submit their information, then they're just getting a check in the mail, and that they've received the funds.
Yeah, and totally understand that not all of these questions have really clear answers. So we're definitely all in it together trying to figure it out. We do have a few questions about who is eligible for Erap.
Yes, anyone is eligible for Erap.
Great. Perfect.
Yep.
But what do you do if a client is denied? Like, what would you recommend their next steps be? Can you appeal that?
Yes, you can appeal it.
Okay.
There is an appeal process for Erap, and I'm just trying to get the most current information on that. So there is an one moment.
Right. Feel free to continue to add questions into the chat about Erap, or even if they're in reference to anything that was discussed before, send it in, we'll get to it.
Okay, so if someone receives a denial, they have 30 days to file an appeal, or if they did not receive the entire amount that they requested, they have 30 days to file an appeal. The notice is usually has, they're usually incorrect. Like, they don't have all of the information that they're supposed to have. So even if you're not sure why you should be filing appeal, if they should be filing an appeal, because the notice is incorrect off base. So there's already a basis for the individual to get an appeal hearing. They can file, and I'll put the phone number in the chat. They can file the appeal by calling 8444 NY1 rent, or 833 843 8829.
Great.
So
and we'll share all of this in the follow-up email, so don't worry, everyone.
Yep, so those are the phone numbers that they can call if they have an appeal request. They should be putting in the determination letter the reason for the denial, and just make sure that the client has the documents that they need. And remember, it's 30 days from the denial date. So even if they don't have all of the information that they need to file a really, really good appeal, just as long as they request the appeal first, I think that would be a great first step.
Great. And then how do they notify applicants?
So this has also been On and off. Some applicants don't get anything. We're just checking on the Erap website and seeing that there's an approval, but most applicants have been getting emails. If they have an email attached to their application, or if they have an advocate attached to their application, that advocate has also been getting emails. There have been letters that have gone out, but not as frequently.
And just responding to the chat, that number that was put in there just now is for filing an appeal if you were denied or if you did not receive the full amount.
Both numbers are for the appeals, yes.
Okay. A little bit related to finding out if you were approved. Someone said that most of their clients who received Erap have reported that they were not informed about how much was paid to their landlord, and then therefore they don't know how much they still need to pay. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, so we've been trying to put the information together through different sources. Step one is always call the Erap hotline and see if they're able to give you any more information. And if you don't get someone who's able to give you information on the first call, call again. Another thing is try and get that information from the landlord. If your client has an email address and their email was associated with their Erap application, ask them to maybe search Erap in their spam or even their inbox if they get a lot of email, because the notification might have been missed, or maybe emergency rent, just in case Erap was spelled out in the email.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does Erap work if you live in supportive housing?
Yeah, so for people in supportive housing or for people receiving subsidies, they are put at the bottom of the pile for Erap. Erap is, everyone qualifies for Erap, but the people who are considered a first priority are those who are not receiving any type of Section 8, who are not living in NYCHA, who are not in subsidized housing. So if receiving FEPS or city FEPS, like any type of Section 8 is really the true bottom, but they are taking into consideration if a household receives any type of housing assistance already. But just because Erap doesn't exist anymore, and this is the biggest, most important thing about Erap, you can still apply for a one-shot deal. You can still apply for one-time assistance. Those things haven't gone away. Charities still have money. In fact, they might even have a little bit more money than they used to, because there haven't been people applying since June of 2021, right? So not saying that they're sitting around doing nothing, but there are still other resources available. Erap was only supposed to be here for a limited amount of time. So if your client is no longer eligible for Erap, or if they don't reopen the Erap application, all is not lost. You can still apply for a one-shot deal. You can still reach out to the charities. Those sources still exist, and they will continue to exist.
Great. And yeah, in terms of the other resources, they're all in this slide, and you will be getting that so you can review and take in that information that way, and then move forward. We're still getting some questions about reasons a person might be denied. I think, people might be a little worried if they haven't heard back yet.
Definitely. They might be taking more time with households that have other sources of income. I do not think that they will deny a household because they have too high an income. So the whole point of Erap is for households that had some type of COVID-related financial emergency, right? So if that isn't documented well, I guess the state, OTDA, might try and deny, but I would still file an appeal. Is my suggestion.
And
Hi, I just wanted to say I did try the number that you gave out, and I did learn that my client was approved, and they're just waiting for the money to be sent. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Congratulations to your client and congratulations to you.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And so to clarify, immigration status does not impact eligibility for Erap or your chances of receiving it.
No.
So apply regardless of immigration status. Everyone has an equal shot. Okay. Sorry, just going through the questions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if you applied for Erap and the application number was deleted?
I would call the so deleted, like we don't have it anymore, call the hotline. Deleted, like the hotline doesn't have it anymore, call and say you don't know the application number. Give them the name and the date of birth of the applicant. Try it that way.
Okay. Deleted, like the patients had an application number and now they do not online.
So if I could ask a couple follow-up questions, like I've had a situation where my client gave me the correct information as to the application number, but my client had mistyped his date of birth. So his application has a wrong date of birth. So we had to call Erap and figure all of that out just to figure out that the application had the wrong date of birth. So I would just say call the helpline, because whatever is missing, whatever you don't have access to that they should be able to give you that information.
Hi, quick question. The hotline is it the 844 or is it the 833?
It's not on the screen at all, but we will give you that phone number.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just added it.
Awesome.
And
they also have a chat function. Some people found it helpful. It's you can find it on the website that's the last thing on the screen right now, but it's not always helpful. But there is a chat.
And this question might require a little bit more input from the person who asked, but does Erap help pay back rent for a room that was rented? And so I don't know if that means they weren't on the lease or if they were splitting rent with people.
Right. So I have seen situations where someone requested Erap for themselves. The roommates are expected to participate in that. So the roommates have to give their own information in order for that application to be processed successfully. Sometimes if the roommate does not give information, for example, if they don't want to give their social security number, or if someone is out of status and they don't have a social security number, what we will do is we'll put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for that. So that's the only step that you may not be able to go past. But and if that person's roommate does not cooperate, just try and fill in the information as best as you can. Just make sure something is there, or you can put in like not cooperating, first name not last name cooperating, or something like that.
Hi, I would like to share my situation, my experience. Marta Fernandes Reiseboro. Unfortunately, in my case, the homemate pay on time, and my senior client didn't pay. In this case, they didn't help my client because the tenant pay on time. So in this situation, you cannot use Erap, as I understood and happy with my client.
Thank you for sharing.
Welcome. I'm very upset because a senior lady couldn't pay. She's senior, sick. So I'm very frustrated because I spent all process to support her. In the end, they say no. Okay. I have a question. How the client know how much they pay for the landlord? They say they approve, but I don't know. They know how much they pay. Is possible to know?
I would call to see and ask specifically how much were they approved for. But remember, Erap isn't the only source of rent arrears. Right now, it was the easiest source for people to apply to, but there are still other ways that people can get rental assistance. And a lot of charities are excited to be able to be of help again.
The tenant will know because they normally get a letter stating not only how much rent was paid, but how many months was paid.
Right. It should be a breakdown, but not every tenant has received that letter, unfortunately. So we have seen situations where landlords and attorneys and paralegals have had to call in to request that letter be sent again, whether it's email or regular mail, and also request just the information over the phone as well.
All right. I know we have a few other slides left.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of other questions.
So I'll try and go through the next part, and then I'll still try and be here for questions afterwards as well. But you all are asking amazing questions, and thank you so much for your time and patience. So we are going to continue with ongoing assistance. Right. So ongoing source of arrears and rent. So sometimes when individuals access some of these resources, the organization will also pay for the arrears and pay ongoing rent. So there is shelter allowance, which is received through HRA, FEPS and city FEPS, and HASA, which are administered through HRA. SCREE and DREE, which is a rent freeze, is a credit to the landlord. Section 8, NYCHA Public Housing, and the foster care rent subsidy, we don't really have the ability to advocate for that unless you work for a specific organization, right? So I know that there are some Section 8, some home bases who have a very, very limited amount of vouchers for Section 8 individuals. But NYCHA Public Housing is an application that can sometimes take years. And the foster care rent subsidy is an option, but your client should not be doing foster care just to get a rent subsidy, right? So it's just another source of ongoing rental assistance that some families are eligible for that they did not know that they were eligible for before. So we're going to talk about some of these. We're going to start with the ongoing rental assistance available from NYCHRA. So I want to specify that these are all programs that are limited to households that are in the 5 boroughs, right? So there is shelter allowance, and you know the name makes you think that it's a lot, but it is very, very a small amount that's available for only households that are receiving full cash assistance. So their entire welfare cash assistance case is open. This can include money that has already been issued on behalf of the tenant that the landlord hasn't received yet. So sometimes checks get lost in the mail, or the landlord didn't know what this check was for because it wasn't clearly marked, so they didn't cash it, right? Sometimes our clients don't know that they are eligible for shelter assistance, for the shelter allowance. So it's important that when they are submitting an application for full cash assistance, that they also submit their lease. Or if they are a roommate, or if they're living with family, that family member or that roommate submits the lease and also submits a letter saying, I allow this individual to live in my household for 1 year or whatever the time frame is, so that that household can receive that shelter allowance, which will help lower the rent payments for the household. So the most common forms that advocates are able to get for ongoing rental assistance for their clients are FEPS and city FEPS. And I know some of you are more of an expert on these than I will ever be, but FEPS is for families with a minor child, that is a child under the age of 18 or under the age of 19 and in a high school or high school equivalent program. At least one open public assistance shelter case in the household. The child must be on that shelter case. The monthly rent has to be within the FEPS limits, and the rent arrears, excuse me, I know somebody talked about what's the maximum, right? And the rent arrears must also be, excuse me, the rent arrears must also be under $9,000. If it is over $9,000, this is where you can go to those charities, other organizations to try and get the additional assistance. You can't request a one-shot deal though, because it's HRA, and you can't request money from home base because the money is coming out of the same pot. So charities would be the option for arrears over $9,000. It's not impossible to get that, so definitely do still try. Tenants must seek a FEPS provider in order to submit an application. So for FEPS to stay in the apartment, right, those are going to be done through advocacy organizations. For example, Legal Aid does FEPS to stay applications. But normally we only do it for clients who have a housing court case. There's also city FEPS, right? There's also FEPS to move. FEPS to move can only be done through a home-based organization. So FEPS to move applications can only be submitted through a home-based organization. Sometimes the home-based organizations also work with adult protective services, but for the most part, FEPS to move can only be submitted through a home-based organization. City FEPS is available to households where at least one individual is a veteran, adult protective services client, formerly homeless, a shelter resident of the Department of Homeless Shelters, so they have to be a part of the DHS system, or a rent-controlled tenant. So rent controlled is very, very different from rent stabilized, right? There are so very few rent controlled apartments now, but if your client has a rent controlled apartment, and you would be able to see that normally through the lease, that client would be eligible for city FEPS if they need that type of assistance. The household must have under 200% of the federal poverty level, must have that income. If it's over, then they are no longer eligible. And they can apply for city FEPS only through home base. And like I said, adult protective services can also assist with submitting the applications. The organizations usually work together to do that. But those are the FEPS, and city FEPS are two of the major sources of ongoing rental assistance that advocates are able to help clients apply for. So normally with FEPS and city FEPS, it's only available for households that have a housing lawsuit against them. But temporarily, the state, as a result of a lawsuit that the Legal Aid Society has filed, the state has made FEPS and city FEPS available until the end of the eviction moratorium. So as of right now, the end of the eviction moratorium is January 15th, 2021. 2022. So a household that owes rent and meets all of the other requirements would be eligible to apply for FEPS or city FEPS until that time. It's temporary. We're trying to make it a permanent thing. So outside of the eviction moratorium, any household that has housing insecurity and needs ongoing assistance would be eligible, but we're still working on that lawsuit. So as of right now, it's only limited to the eviction moratorium, and for clients who are applying for FEPS or city FEPS, they do have to owe rent though. The fourth program that I like to talk about is HASA. So this is available to individuals with HIV or AIDS. And the HASA program provides a one-stop space for program members to receive assistance. So it's not only rental assistance, but rental assistance is a big part of it. And a great thing about HASA is that they also have access to housing programs as well. So they will be, sometimes they are able to help someone find housing as well as help them pay for the rent. So these are different sources of housing assistance, rental assistance that you can get from NYCHA. So now we're gonna move on to the senior citizen and disability rent freeze. So this rent freeze, SCREE and DREE, are credit programs for landlords in New York State. So the rent is always charged at its full price, but it's frozen at a specific price for these tenants. And the landlord usually gets a credit for that in their taxes at the end of when they file their taxes, right? So SCREE is for households where there is someone who is at least 62 years old, lives in regulated housing. So what regulated housing means is that the housing is somehow connected to the law. Examples of that are rent stabilized housing, rent controlled housing, Mitchell-Lama housing, or any housing where the landlord is receiving some type of federal assistance. The household income must be under $50,000, and the individual applying must spend at least a third of their income on the rent. For DREE, it's very similar, but the household, instead of being a senior citizen, the individual applying must be at least 18 years old and receive a disability-related income. So that can be Social Security insurance, Social Security disability. It can also be work-related, so a work-related disability insurance. Sometimes the U.S. Postal Service also has their own type of disability insurance. So SCREE and DREE are rent freezes that freeze the rent at a certain amount, but in the packet that I have, we also have the applications for first time for that, for those programs as well. And it explains a little bit more what information is needed from the client. So those are some examples of ongoing rental assistance. The ones that will pay for the arrears are FEPS and City FEPS and HASA. So the ones that don't pay for the arrears, you can apply for a one-shot deal or a rent assistance grant. And then these are the programs that you would use to show future ability, right? So sometimes it's a mix and match of different things in order to figure out what's the best way to help our clients pay the rent. And so the things like the SCREE and DREE, and also, let's see, SCREE and DREE, and maybe the shelter allowance will make the rent more affordable, right? But the household might still have to apply for a one-shot deal in order to pay the arrears off.
Or on your printer.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now we're gonna talk a little bit about when should you contact an attorney or legal advocate, right? So a lot of times things don't always work out as we would want. And there might be a denial of some sort, and we have to figure out how to make sure that our clients don't become homeless. These are the instances where I would say definitely contact an attorney. If your client receives any court papers at all, housing-related court papers, contact an attorney. If they receive an eviction notice, immediately contact an attorney. If there are extreme repairs, unfortunately, I have to say extreme because the bar is really, really high for repairs for the courts, even though I completely understand that a lot of repairs are necessary and need to be done. They need to be really, really bad in order for a court to pay attention. If your client is locked out, so that can mean like the gas or the electricity is turned off, right? They can't use the apartment, or if the locks have been changed. If your client is locked out, they should definitely contact an attorney. Or if they are forced out, for example, if there was a fire in a house, in the household, or in a nearby household that made their space unlivable. There were a lot of families forced out of their living arrangements after the hurricanes because their basement apartments just became unlivable, right? So I would say definitely contact an attorney or an legal advocate if any of these situations come up, because these are what are considered emergencies, so that we can take the necessary steps in order to protect their rights in court and make sure that the landlord does not take advantage of their rights in court. So that is the end of my presentation. My contact information is on the screen, but I will be taking questions now as well. Oh, I think Tess, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So keep putting the questions in the chat. I want to get to a few of the more client-specific questions that came through, if that works for you.
Yeah.
So what's the process? Oh, no, okay. Sorry. Okay. When approved through Erap, how would a, nope, we already did that one. Amazing. Lots of overlap, a lot of people with the same concerns. Okay. If a client has cash assistance and is in desperate need for rental assistance, but could not apply for Erap, how can they be assisted?
They should apply for a one-shot deal immediately. If they have the Access Hra app, they should go on the app and then submit a application for rent arrears. They can also do it online on the Hra website, submit an application for rent arrears. They would still need a lot of the documentation that we went through before. So make sure that they have that and their housing information. And if your client has cash assistance and they've fallen behind on the rent, see if they're also eligible for shelter allowance, or if they're receiving shelter allowance, or if they're eligible for FEPS, if there's a minor in the household.
Great. Okay. Are subtenants who are in units where the NFP provider is the leaseholder eligible for Erap?
They should be eligible for Erap, yes. But if they are subtenants, they're definitely eligible for Erap. Hopefully Erap reopens, but they should also have other resources available to them. Like their rent shouldn't be too high. Their rent should be affordable. But if life happened and they've just fallen behind, then okay. But also if their rent is too high and it needs to be readjusted, maybe take that step as well. That might be a sign of something else, is essentially what I'm saying.
Okay. And yes, ISO2's contact information will be available, will be sent in the follow-up email, and it's in these slides, of course. Okay, another client question. I have a senior citizen whose rent is higher than her only source of income, which is Social Security insurance. HRA said she's not eligible because her SSI amount for a single person disqualifies her, and they also have ongoing health problems. What should they do?
I'm so sorry.
Requested and is pending.
Yeah, it does not sound like that fair hearing will be won. Unfortunately, housing is very expensive for a lot of individuals, especially in New York City. Unfortunately, if I was in your situation, I would try and figure out a way for my clients to move, but that's not the end all be all. See if they are eligible for SCREE or DREE. If they're a senior citizen, they might be eligible for SCREE if they live in a rent stabilized or rent controlled or Mitchell-Lama apartment. that might help them out with freezing their rent, especially if what they're receiving is not enough. And the discrete application will be in the paperwork that's passed around later. But you also just generally should maybe have a conversation with your client about moving, but just like to let them know the seriousness of what's going
on. If a client has lived in an apartment for over 30 days but is not on the lease, can a landlord evict them?
Yes, but that landlord has to go through court, right? So that client doesn't necessarily have the right to stay in that apartment. That client, and it's so weird for me to say, has a right to be evicted, right? So they have to go through the process of getting evicted. The landlord can't just change the locks, but it sounds like if that individual doesn't necessarily have the right to stay there, but they have a right to be evicted. They have a right to go through the court process to explain their side of the story. And if a judge says, no, this person needs to be evicted, then unfortunately that is what it will be. But it will give your client a little bit of time to try and find another place, or maybe apply for a program that they weren't eligible for before, but they might be eligible for now because they have a housing court case.
Okay. And I think that the person who sent the question about their senior citizen client in the chat, they've been there for 45 years, she doesn't want to move. I am sorry that you and your client are dealing with that right now. That is really terrible. Okay, we're having some asks for assistance for people who are undocumented. You mentioned a type of assistance that was available.
Yes, I'm so sorry. It's FASTEN, FASTEN. It's a program that's available through Homebase. So a part of the material will be a Homebase chart, and then you can connect with your client's Homebase, and they should have access to FASTEN, FASTEN, which has been a great resource, I could just say, amazing resource for undocumented households. So it's been really, really great to see that there are households that are able to get that type of assistance. But the name of the program is FASTEN, FASTEN, doing great work.
Okay, great. And is that for households where everyone is undocumented, but then
every
there are
single
other
person
available for families that has maybe one person with a different status?
Yes, but then it's really like I have clients who there is one person who has status, but they do not feel comfortable applying for for any type of resource, and they just want to do a payment plan, right? So like it really is working with what your client is comfortable with doing and understanding that they are taking a huge risk. And so sometimes it is just a payment plan that you'll have to set up, but most clients will work with you and try and figure something out.
And does FASTEN work for people who don't have any income source?
I think there needs to be income in the household. So the other rules do apply, like showing future ability to pay the rent, because then how is the household going to continue to stay in that residence, right? So a lot of these programs want to know that the money that they are paying is keeping a family in their community or is keeping individuals in the community. If it's only to pay for this amount for them to only move the next month, a lot of programs are not comfortable with doing that.
Oh, and there's someone in here, Ronaldo, who works at Homebase and supervises the FASTEN program. So if you want to enter your email in here for people to get in contact with you, please feel free to do so. I'm sure you might have some takers. Thank
you, Ronaldo. That's an amazing program. It's amazing. Love it so much.
Are individual, this is not, okay, different topic. Are individuals granted shelter allowance in transitional housing?
They can be. So to get shelter allowance, you just have to show that you have a rent obligation, that you are required to pay something to your rent. For example, if you have a 19-year-old child who is living at home with you, but they don't have a rental obligation, they may be able to get cash assistance, but they won't get the shelter allowance. If someone is living in transitional housing and they have a rental obligation, like they are required to pay this amount in rent, if they have proof of the amount in rent that they have to pay and they are eligible for cash assistance, they will also be eligible to request shelter allowance.
All right, just scrolling through, seeing if I missed anything major. Okay, what happens if the landlord, in relation to Erap, what happens if the landlord is not interested in Erap and takes the client to court? This person has a client and her landlord is refusing to participate in the program because she doesn't want to be obligated to keep the client for an additional year.
You don't need a landlord's permission to apply for Erap. Unfortunately, the application has closed. You don't need a landlord's permission or cooperation to apply for Erap. It would be easier if they did, because the application is processed more easily. But I would have applied for Erap anyway. That's what I would say to that one.
Okay.
Oh, and Ronaldo clarified that future ability to pay rent moving forward is not a requirement of the program. Thank you.
Okay, that's great to know. All right. Jessica, you have a question about HASA. Do you want to hop on and ask? Oh, you asked it too. Okay. My client has HASA, and due to an error in the system, his subsidy has been discontinued for about 12 months. When they were reinstated, HASA was only, I'll let you read this actually, because it's.
Yeah, so I usually find that the caseworkers in HASA are extremely helpful. So I would say reach out to your client's caseworker. And if you have issues contacting the client's caseworker, send me an email and I will try and give you another contact individual. But yeah, no, I usually find that client caseworkers, CASA caseworkers are on top of it. So just send me an email and we'll figure something out.
Thank you for that. Okay. All right. So if someone was registered for Erap but was not able to begin his application, can the application still be submitted?
If they have an application number, then yes. So all they need is an application number. If they don't know what that application number is, you can call the Erap hotline and say, like, hey, my client doesn't remember their application number. Can you please let me know what it is?
Everyone, I just launched a poll. If you could take a quick moment to answer it. Thank you so much. All right. If a client's applied for Erap twice, will this person be rejected for both of their applications?
Call the helpline and have them delete one application.
I'm also putting another link to a short survey in the chat. If you're able to fill that out, it really helps the consortium identify future needs, other ways we can support you, other legal aid trainings we can provide for you. So please take a moment to fill that out. All right, just check in for any other questions. Okay, I think that's all. If you asked a question and I didn't get to it, please feel free to throw it in right now. How does someone show ability if the individual does not have working papers?
So if the individual is working like off the books is one term that people use, wherever they're getting their income from, they can show that. So if they have someone that's giving them money, then maybe have that individual write a letter and sign it and put their contact information and say, for example, Isatu Barry works for me. She works 30 hours a week at a rate of $10 an hour. She has worked for me since June of 2021. I pay her a weekly amount of, I can't do math, y'all, but like, I think that's $300 a week. So if you need any information, here is my name and phone number to contact me. Some people who get that type of employment are not able to get the letter. So another way is bank records. If someone has a bank account, it's super helpful to show that, oh, this person is getting $300 every Sunday, and they're depositing $300 every Sunday, and they can just write a letter themselves and saying, I was unable to get a letter, but this is what I am making. Please call me if you need any information. But it's important for them to say, I wasn't able to get a letter.
Yeah, yes, hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, you spoke about charity organization that one can get assistance with rent arrears. What are some of those charity organizations that you refer to?
Yeah, so there's gonna be a list in the information that is sent to you later, but part of the solution, POTS, also known as POTS, Catholic Charities is one, Coalition for the Homeless, that's another great organization. Homebase has a lot of different organizations that they work with. There will be a map with zip codes that will also tell you which specific home base you can reach out to get information for your client, but they also have a website. So if you want to check out their website and connect to your client's zip code, you can also do that. Those are just some. Sometimes you can even, oh, and there was on the handout, the first number, there is, sorry, let me just go back. There is the Emergency Rent Coalition Hotline, and they have access to different resources too. So that might be a great first step, because you can tell them a little bit of information about your clients and they will be able to better direct you. Because I work out of the Bronx office, so I don't know necessarily about the resources of all of the resources available in Queens or in Brooklyn, but with a little bit more information to the Emergency Rent Coalition Hotline, they will be able to guide you better as to what borough-specific information you can get.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
And I think someone was asking if the letter, like proving like work and income, does that need to be a notarized letter?
It's so hard to get a notarization now these days. So my first answer is don't notarize it and just see what they say. But if you do have easy access to a notary, then notarize it. But it's so difficult to get access to a notary now these days. So definitely just do your best. You're collecting a lot of information for one individual. So I think it's important to just submit what you have. Don't not submit something because it's not perfect, right? You give them the opportunity to explain to you what additional information you might need.
Great. Thank you so much. This was an amazing training, and we appreciate everyone for asking other questions. As we mentioned, you will receive this recording, the slideshow, and some additional resources in the next couple days. And so you can share that with your colleagues and anyone who might find it helpful. For future trainings from the Health and Housing Consortium, since you all attended this event, you will also be on our email list. And we offer trainings really frequently, and you will now be kept in the loop. And if there's any specific trainings that would be helpful for you, please fill out the survey I just put in the chat, or you can send me an email. I'm flexible. And so, yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you, Isatu, for your incredible knowledge and support here. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Have a great day.